When the history of the Trump era is written, what happened to Todd Blanche will be in the discussion questions at the end of the weaponized Department of Justice chapter. There is no retribution campaign against Donald Trump's perceived political enemies who, by the way, aren't enemies at all, but merely public servants doing their jobs in every instance without Todd Blanche's zeal for carrying out that retribution campaign. Brand new reporting in the New York Times based on newly released emails from a Freedom of Information Act request revealed just how much Todd Blanche has controlled and caused turmoil in the Department of Justice in his mission to fulfill Trump's wish of punishing all those perceived enemies. According to the Times, what led to Blanche putting himself in the driver's seat of the DOJ's retribution efforts last May was this. He was, quote, handed a migraine in a Detective Columbo trench coat by the name of Edward R. Martin, Jr. Martin, a right-wing lawyer who championed the cause of the January 6th rioters, had just been forced out as the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. The White House then installed Ed Martin as the head of the Weaponization Working Group. Martin put on nothing less than a show for Donald Trump, like when he showed up at the Brooklyn home of New York's Attorney General Tish James in that Detective Columbo trench coat, while he tried to cook up a mortgage fraud case against her. The New York Times reports that Todd Blanche, quote, didn't believe that Martin, a provocateur with minimal prosecutorial experience, had the chops and know-how to do the job. That's according to current and former officials who spoke anonymously. Notably, Blanche doesn't fire him, though. No. He hands him the keys to the car and then supervised his driving by, quote, scheduling a check-in meeting every Friday, according to this trove of internal Justice Department emails. The emails also reveal that Todd Blanche, quote, created an organizational plan for the Weaponization Working Group that assigned key investigative lanes to some of his own deputies. That ensured, among other things, that he had tight control over one of the most sensitive issues on his plate, demands from Trump and his supporters to identify, investigate, and punish those who have once pursued them. Since exerting control within DOJ, here's what Todd Blanche has directed and managed, all of which he should have to answer for at his confirmation hearing tomorrow. Failed retribution cases against New York Attorney General Tish James and former FBI Director Jim Comey. A renewed effort to target Jim Comey over a picture of seashells that spell out the numbers 8647. The purging of hundreds of career Justice Department employees who worked on cases against Donald Trump. The mishandling of the Epstein files, which we'll dive into in depth in the next hour. The subpoenas served to Minnesota officials amid the Trump administration's immigration occupation, which were later quashed by a judge, and the attempted investigation into the widow of Renee Nicole Good, who was killed by ICE agents in Minnesota. Now, if there is one bright spot in the wake of all of this, as former special counsel Jack Smith told us earlier this month, it is those within the Department of Justice who have resisted Todd Blanche and his efforts.
We've seen so many times in these retribution cases where prosecutors wouldn't be a part of it. You know, prosecutors in Minnesota who are like, I'm not going to investigate the family member of a shooting victim. I'm not doing that. Prosecutors who wouldn't go through with retribution prosecutions. And those people give up a lot. This is their whole career. A lot of them, you know, this isn't a lucrative sort of profession for a lawyer in terms of what you could do in private practice. They have to support their families. And one thing I have hope about is I think the traditions in the department, the people it draws, are so strong that we're going to have to rehabilitate the department for sure. But there's a lot of people still there, still in place, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to follow the facts and the law, not be a part of any retribution campaign.
Todd Blanche's role in the perversion of justice is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. The journalist bylined on that piece, New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush, is here. Plus, former top DOJ official and general counsel for the FBI, our legal analyst, Andrew Weissman's back with us. Also joining us, former assistant special agent in charge at the FBI, national security and intelligence analyst Michael Feinberg's here. Glenn Thrush, first tell me how you got migraine wrapped in a Detective Columbo trench coat into the pages of the New York Times. I squealed with delight when I read those words.
Well, it was. I think my editors must have been on vacation, and I got lucky. Sometimes it's like, you know, It's like that final shot at the end of the first Star Wars when, the missile gets to the heart of the Death Star. So,
It's perfect.
I want to do the prayer hands emojis to my bosses on that one. But, I mean, it illustrates essentially the catalytic event that really prompted Todd Blanche to take control of the so-called anti-weaponization working group inside the Justice Department. It wasn't necessarily Blanche's firm belief in any one of these principles, right? He is broadly motivated by a desire to execute Trump's wishes. It's not like Todd Blanche doesn't agree with Donald Trump that the Justice Department had been mobilized against him and some of his supporters. It's Blanche has a general sense of wanting to control it. I think what these emails, and it's 392 pages, and it was provided to me from by American Oversight, a watchdog group. What they really show here is Blanche really trying to assert control inside the department, probably because he has so little control outside of it, right? And Ed Martin was inserted really against Blanche's wishes because he had flopped as the U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia. He had no prosecutorial experience, Ed Martin. He was doing all this crazy performative stuff. And really, Blanche needed a way to neutralize Martin because he couldn't have this operation, the anti-weaponization group, in the hands of somebody he couldn't control. Now, what is interesting is this mechanism, this group, this task force, we had all anticipated that this would be the primary conduit for this vengeance campaign by Trump. It has turned out, largely through the design of Todd Blanche, not to have played that role. Instead, Blanche has kind of dealt with these issues, Blanche and before him, Pam Bondi. But we should remember that Blanche, before he was acting attorney general, was deputy attorney general, really running the day-to-day operations of the department. And Bondi, while an active player, was never really as clued in to President Trump as Blanche was for the 19 months of this administration. So Blanche has essentially tried to manage Donald Trump's demands in a way that allowed him to assert some level of control over this. And I think the argument that Blanche has been making, more suggested than explicit to Democrats and Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee, is I have stopped a lot of bad things from happening. I know I've had to agree to a bunch of prosecutions, including the Comey Seychelles prosecution. But the suggestion, or at least the belief among Republicans on the committee, is that Blanche is the least unpalatable option available to them as a permanent attorney general.
So I'm going to, Michael Feinberg, I'm going to call BS on that and show you Todd Blanche bragging to right-wing activist Matt Schlapp about the DOJ purge, because I think Glenn Thrush is correct. He's going to present himself tomorrow as the least offensive option, but I'd take Matt Gaetz over this guy. Watch.
There is not a single man or woman at the Department of Justice who had anything to do with those prosecutions.
How many have been canned?
Over 200. Over 200 either left before we came in because they knew it was coming, or were fired, or took early retirement. They are no longer employed by this department. And when it comes to the FBI, which takes a lot of criticism, especially because of what happened over the past several years, Director Patel has cleaned house there, too. There isn't a single man or woman with a gun, federal agent, still in that organization that had anything to do with the prosecution of President Trump.
Now, Michael Feinberg, thanks to Glenn Thrush's great reporting and some of the things you've shared since you left, I mean, they're clapping for the purging of Walt Giordino, a longtime FBI agent who was fired as his wife lay dying of cancer. Brian Driscoll, someone with decades of experience in counterterrorism, a real national security asset to the United States government under Democratic and Republican presidents. They're applauding the purging of agents who had no say on which cases they worked on, but they got involved in the Trump cases because Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco appointed a special counsel, and they needed agents and they needed prosecutors. So that's what those people are clapping for, and those were the applause lines that Todd Blanche fed them. I'd take Matt Gaetz 7 days a week over that guy.
Look, choosing between Matt Gaetz and Todd Blanche as a boss or as a political leader is sort of like flipping a coin between self-administered poison and a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I wouldn't wish any of them upon my friends, and I wouldn't wish either of them upon my country. But the mere fact that Todd Blanche was willing to go to as partisan and performative an exercise as CPAC and brag about firing people for doing their jobs that they had been assigned, because you are absolutely correct. FBI agents do not pick the cases on which they work. Half the time, they're sitting at their desk when the supervisor walks by looking for any body to throw at a problem. So to ruin their lives because they followed the chain of command is not just malicious, it goes against this administration's very emphasis on that chain of command. As Kash Patel himself has repeatedly stated, the chain of command is part of what makes the FBI. But I also want to note something, and I'm not trying to, throw fuel on the fire. Todd Blanche is wrong. There's actually quite a few people who worked on all those investigations still at DOJ and still at FBI. These people can't even carry out their purges effectively. These people have nothing on Stalin. They have nothing on the Stasi. Their motivations may be similar, but their effectiveness really leaves a lot to be desired.